Have you ever stopped to wonder why certain moments in life feel so profound, like they're tailored specifically for you? As a chosen one, you're not like everyone else. You're part of the 1% who are meant to hear the whispers of the divine, to decode the mysteries of existence, and to walk a path that most people don't even know exists. But here's the truth: God doesn't communicate with us in the way we expect. He doesn't send flashing neon signs or booming voices from the sky. Instead, he speaks through subtlety, through layers of meaning that only those who are attuned can understand. Today, we're diving deep into this spiritual reality, unraveling the ways God sends messages to you as one of his chosen people. Now think about this: have you ever felt like life was trying to tell you something? Maybe it was a series of coincidences that didn't feel random, or a gut feeling that you couldn't shake, even when everyone else told you it meant nothing. What if I told you that those moments were not accidents? What if I told you they were divine messages, encoded specifically for you? The first way God communicates is through silence. Yes, silence. In a world filled with noise and chaos, the absence of sound can be the loudest message of all. When you sit in silence, when you allow yourself to be still, you create space for God to speak to your soul. In this silence, you may not hear words, but you'll feel something deeper, an inner knowing, a sense of peace, or even a nudge to take a certain action. But here's the challenge: most people are terrified of silence. They fill their lives with distractions to avoid facing themselves. As a chosen one, you must embrace silence. You must lean into it, no matter how uncomfortable it feels at first. Because in that stillness, God's voice becomes undeniable.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lessons.
Let me ask you this: when was the last time you truly sat with yourself, without music, without a podcast, without scrolling through your phone? What are you running from? And what might happen if you stopped running? The second way God sends messages is through nature. The natural world is not just a backdrop to our lives, it's a living, breathing manifestation of divine energy. Have you ever noticed how the wind feels different on certain days? How the rustling leaves seem to whisper secrets? Or how the sky paints messages in clouds and stars? These aren't just poetic ideas, they're real. As a chosen one, you're meant to see the sacred patterns in nature, to feel the rhythm of creation, and to understand that every tree, every river, and every bird carries a message for you. The question is, are you paying attention? When you walk in nature, don't just see it, feel it. Notice the way the sunlight filters through the trees, the way the earth smells after rain, the way a single flower seems to reach toward the sky with unwavering faith. These details are not random, they're intentional. They're God's way of reminding you of your connection to something greater, of showing you that the same force that moves the tides and grows the forests is also moving within you. But here's where it gets deeper: nature doesn't just remind you of your connection to the divine, it also mirrors your inner state. If you're feeling lost, you might find yourself drawn to a foggy morning or a tangled forest. If you're feeling at peace, you might notice the stillness of a lake or the vastness of the sky. Pay attention to what you're drawn to in nature. It's a reflection of your soul. The third way God communicates is through people. This one can be tricky because not everyone in your life is sent by God. Some people are distractions and others are lessons. But then there are those rare individuals who feel like they were placed in your path for a reason. These are the people who challenge you, inspire you, or even frustrate you to the point of transformation. As a chosen one, you must learn to discern who these people are and what messages they carry. Sometimes the message comes in the form of a simple conversation. A stranger might say something in passing that feels like it was meant just for you. Other times the message comes through relationships, through the love, the pain, and the growth that they bring. But here's the key: you must be willing to see these interactions as divine. You must be willing to look beyond the surface and ask yourself, what is God trying to teach me through this person? Let me pause here and ask you, who in your life feels like a mirror right now? Who is reflecting back to you the parts of yourself that you need to see? And are you willing to face those reflections, even when they're uncomfortable? Let's go even deeper. Think about those moments in life when events line up perfectly, so perfectly that it feels impossible to chalk it up to chance. Maybe you were thinking about someone you hadn't seen in years, and out of nowhere, they called you. Or you were searching for an answer, and suddenly, a random phrase on a billboard or in a book seemed to speak directly to your question. These aren't coincidences, they're synchronicities. They're God's way of nudging you, redirecting you, or affirming that you're on the right path. But here's where it gets interesting: synchronicities aren't always about the big, dramatic moments. Sometimes they show up in the smallest details: a song that comes on at just the right time, a repeating number sequence, or even the way a stranger smiles at you when you're feeling down. The challenge is recognizing them for what they are. Most people dismiss these moments as random, but as someone chosen, you can't afford to do that. You have to stay awake. You have to notice. There's a reason why these synchronicities feel so personal. They're tailored specifically for you. No one else would notice them the same way you do. And that's because they're meant for your eyes only. The question is, what are you going to do with them? When life hands you a moment that feels too perfect to ignore, do you brush it off or do you lean into it? What if those little signals are the breadcrumbs leading you towards something far greater than you can imagine? Now comes the harder part: challenges. This is where a lot of people get it wrong. They see obstacles, pain, or setbacks as proof that life is random or unfair. But what if I told you that challenges are one of God's most profound ways of communicating with you? Think about it. Growth never happens when things are easy. Clarity never comes when you're comfortable. It's in the fire of difficulty that you're refined, shaped into the person you were always meant to be. And as a chosen one, your challenges aren't just about you. They're about the role you're meant to play in the world. Have you ever noticed how the same types of problems keep showing up in your life? Maybe it's a pattern in your relationships, your career, or even your own thoughts. That's not a coincidence either. Those patterns are God's way of calling your attention to something you need to face. Until you learn the lesson, the challenge will keep reappearing in different forms. It's not punishment, it's guidance. It's a signal that there's something greater waiting for you on the other side of that struggle. But here's a hard truth: most people resist their challenges. They try to avoid them, numb themselves, or blame others. As someone chosen, you don't get that luxury. You're being asked to look directly at what's hard, to sit with it, and to let it transform you. That's how God speaks to you, through the very things you wish you could escape. What's one struggle in your life right now that you've been avoiding? What if, instead of running from it, you saw it as the key to unlocking the next level of your purpose? And let's not forget the timing of these challenges. Have you ever noticed how they tend to show up right when you're on the verge of something big? It's almost like the universe is testing you, asking, are you ready for what's next? Are you strong enough to carry the weight of what you're asking for? This isn't about earning God's favor, it's about preparing yourself for the responsibility that comes with being chosen. Because let's be honest, being chosen isn't easy. It's not about being special or better than anyone else. It's about being willing to take on a role that most people would run from. And then there's this sometimes. The message isn't in the challenge itself, but in how you respond to it. Are you able to maintain faith when everything seems to be falling apart? Do you still believe in your path when it feels like all the doors are closing? That's the real test. And when you pass it, you find that the very thing you thought was breaking you was actually building you. But let's talk about something even more mysterious: intuition. That inner voice that doesn't shout but whispers. That feeling in your gut that you can't quite explain but know you shouldn't ignore. This is one of the most direct ways God communicates with you. It's not always logical, and it doesn't always make sense to the people around you. But it's real, and as a chosen one, your intuition is sharper than most. It's your compass, your direct line to the divine. The problem is, we live in a world that trains us to ignore it. We're told to rely on logic, to follow the rules, to do what makes sense. But intuition doesn't care about those things. It cares about truth. When was the last time you felt something in your gut but talked yourself out of it? Maybe you felt drawn to a certain person, but you hesitated because it didn't make sense on paper. Or maybe you felt a warning about a situation but ignored it because you didn't want to seem paranoid. What would happen if you stopped doubting that inner voice? What would happen if you trusted it completely, even when it didn't make sense? Here's the thing about intuition: it doesn't always lead you on an easy path. Sometimes it guides you straight into the unknown, into decisions that scare you or make you uncomfortable. But that's the point. God doesn't call you to what's easy, He calls you to what's true. And as a chosen one, your truth isn't just about you. It's about the impact you're meant to have on the world. Let's pause here for a moment. Think about everything we've talked about so far: silence, nature, people, synchronicities, challenges, and intuition. Which one of these messages has been showing up the most in your life lately? And are you willing to pay attention to what it's trying to tell you? Let's take this even further. If you're a chosen one, it means there's a reason you're here, a purpose that runs deeper than just existing, working, or accumulating material achievements. There's a thread connecting your life to something larger, something that most people never notice. But here's the thing: God doesn't just hand you a neatly wrapped package labeled purpose. He reveals it piece by piece, often in ways that feel confusing or even frustrating. The process of aligning with your mission isn't straightforward, but it's deliberate, and every twist and turn has meaning. One of the clearest signs that God is aligning you with your purpose comes when things start falling apart. It sounds counterintuitive, but when life gets messy, when relationships end, plans fail, or you're forced to let go of what you thought you wanted, it's often because He's clearing the way for something better. Most of us cling to what's familiar, even when it's no longer serving us. We resist change because it's uncomfortable. But when you're chosen, you don't get to stay where it's safe. You're being called to step into the unknown, to let go of what no longer fits and make room for what's meant for you. Think about the times in your life when something you desperately wanted didn't work out. Maybe it was a job, a relationship, or a dream you'd been holding onto for years. At the time, it probably felt like a loss. But looking back, can you see how those moments were actually redirections? How they pushed you towards something you didn't even know you needed? That's how alignment works. It's not always gentle, but it's always intentional. Another way God aligns you with your mission is through repetition. When the same themes, ideas, or opportunities keep showing up in your life, it's not random. It's a sign that you're being nudged towards something specific. Maybe you've noticed that people keep coming to you for advice on a particular topic, or that certain ideas keep popping into your head, no matter how much you try to ignore them. These are clues. They're God's way of saying, pay attention. This is part of your path. But here's where it gets tricky. Alignment doesn't always feel like alignment. Sometimes it feels like chaos. Sometimes it feels like you're being pushed to your limits or asked to do things that scare you. That's because purpose isn't about comfort, it's about impact. And to make an impact, you have to grow. Growth, by its nature, is uncomfortable. It stretches you, challenges you, and forces you to confront parts of yourself that you'd rather avoid. But it's in that discomfort that you find your strength. Let's talk about resistance. Have you ever noticed how the closer you get to something meaningful, the more resistance you feel? It's like part of you knows that stepping into your purpose will require you to change, and change is terrifying. Resistance often shows up as fear, procrastination, or self-doubt. It whispers things like, "You're not ready for this," or "Who do you think you are to take this on?" But here's the truth: resistance is a signal that you're on the right track. It's not there to stop you, it's there to test you. To see if you're willing to push through and claim what's already yours. Have you ever wondered why the most meaningful decisions in life come with so much internal conflict? It's because purpose demands a part of you that you haven't fully stepped into yet. It's asking you to grow into the person you were always meant to be. And growth, as we've already said, isn't easy. But the alternative, staying stuck, ignoring the call, living a life that feels hollow, is far worse. Now, let's talk about clarity. A lot of people expect their purpose to hit them like a lightning bolt, a sudden, undeniable realization of what they're meant to do. For some, it happens that way, but for most of us, clarity comes in layers. It's not about figuring out your entire life in one moment, it's about taking the next right step. God rarely shows you the whole picture at once, because He knows it would overwhelm you. Instead, He gives you just enough light for the step you're on. The question is, are you willing to trust that the path will reveal itself as you move forward? Let's get practical. How do you know if you're in alignment with your purpose? One of the clearest signs is a sense of flow. When you're doing what you're meant to do, things have a way of falling into place. It's not that life becomes easy. There will still be challenges, but doors start opening, resources show up, and the right people cross your path. It's like the universe conspires to support you because you're finally moving in the direction you were meant to go. Pay attention to those moments when everything seems to click. They're not random, they're confirmation. But alignment isn't just about what you're doing, it's about who you're being. Are you showing up authentically, or are you wearing a mask to fit in or please others? Are you living in integrity, or are you making compromises that don't feel right in your soul? Being chosen means being willing to live in truth, even when it's inconvenient, even when it sets you apart from others. It means having the courage to say no to what's not for you, so you can say yes to what is. And then there's this: sometimes alignment feels like waiting, like nothing is happening, and you're stuck in limbo. This is one of the hardest parts of being chosen because it feels like you're wasting time. But waiting isn't wasted, it's preparation. God uses these periods of stillness to refine you, to teach you patience, and to strengthen your faith. If you're in a season of waiting right now, it doesn't mean you're off track. It means something is being worked out behind the scenes. Can you trust that the timing will make sense in hindsight? Finally, alignment is about surrender. It's about letting go of the need to control every outcome and trusting that God's plan is bigger and better than anything you could come up with on your own. This doesn't mean sitting back and doing nothing. It means taking inspired action while staying open to the unexpected. It means being willing to adjust your plans when something better comes along, even if it wasn't what you thought you wanted. So here's the real question: are you ready to live as though your life has meaning? Not just in the abstract, but in the small, everyday choices you make. Are you willing to listen to the signals, to trust the process, and to step into the role you were created for? Because being chosen isn't about waiting for some grand moment of revelation. It's about showing up every single day, even when it's hard, even when it doesn't make sense, and trusting that you're being guided towards something extraordinary. This, ultimately, is how God sends messages to you as a chosen one, not in a single, earth-shattering moment, but in the silence, the signs, the challenges, and the flow of life itself. The question isn't whether He's speaking. The question is whether you're listening.